Joan of Arc was born around 1412 in Domremy, a small village in the Meuse Valley now in the Vosges department in the northeast of France. In 1428, she requested to be taken to Charles, later testifying that she was guided by visions from the Archangel Michael, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine. Charles sent Joan, who was about 17 years old, to the siege of Orléans as part of a relief army. She was declared guilty and burned at the stake on 30 May 1431, aged about 19. There is no standard spelling of her name before the 16th century. Her last name was usually written as dark without an apostrophe. The first written record of her being called by this name is in 1455, 24 years after her death. Joan referred to herself in the letters as Jean la Pucelle Joan the Maiden. Joan of Arc was born around 1412 in Domremy, a small village in the Meuse Valley now in the Vosges department in the northeast of France. Her date of birth is unknown and her statements about her age were vague. Her parents were Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Remy. Joan had visions of Saint Michael, a patron saint of the Domremy area who was seen as a defender of France. Her visions also included Saint Margaret and Saint Catherine, although Joan never specified. They were probably Margaret of Antioch and Catherine of Alexandria. Joan testified that her visions had instructed her to defeat the English and crown Charles. Charles Roman VII met Joan for the first time at the royal court in Chinon in late February or early March 1429, when she was 17 and he was 26. She told him that she had come to raise the siege of Orléans and to lead him to Reims for his coronation. Joan was initially treated as a figurehead to raise morale, flying her banner on the battlefield. She was not given any formal command or included in military councils, but quickly gained the support of the Armagnac troops. Joan was wounded by an arrow between the neck and shoulder while holding her banner in the trench on the south bank of the river. After the success at Orléans, Joan insisted that the Armagnac forces should advance promptly toward Reims to crown the Dauphin. Charles allowed her to accompany the army under the command of John Roman II, Duke of Alençon. The Armagnacs needed to recapture the bridge towns along the Ward Jargeau, Meung-sur-Loire, and Beaugency. After the destruction of the English army at Patay, some Armagnac leaders argued for an invasion of English-held Normandy. Joan remained insistent that Charles must be crowned. The Dauphin agreed, and the army left Jean on 29 June to march on Reims. Joan was ennobled by Charles as a reward for her services to him in the kingdom. In October, Joan was sent as part of a force to attack the territory of Perinet-Grassart. The army besieged Saint-Pierre-le-Martyr, which fell after Joan encouraged a direct assault. The Duke of Burgundy began to reclaim towns which had been ceded to him by treaty, but had not submitted to him. Compiègne was one such town of many in areas which the Armagnacs had recaptured over the previous few months. Joan set out with a company of volunteers at the end of March 1430 to relieve the town, which was under siege. This expedition did not have the explicit permission of Charles, who was still observing the truce. Joan was put on trial for heresy in Rouen on 9 January 1431. She was accused of having blasphemed by wearing men's clothes and of acting upon visions that were demonic. Joan testified that her visions had instructed her to defeat the English and crown Charles. If unchallenged, her testimony would invalidate the English claim to the rule of France. As part of her abjuration, Joan was required to renounce wearing men's clothes. She exchanged her clothes for a woman's dress and allowed her head to be shaved. She was returned to her cell and kept in chains instead of being transferred to an ecclesiastical prison. Witnesses at the rehabilitation trial stated that Joan was subjected to mistreatment and rape attempt. After Joan's execution, her role in the Orléans victory encouraged popular support for her rehabilitation. The military situation was not changed by Joan's execution. Her triumphs had raised Armagnac morale, and the English were not able to regain momentum. The rehabilitation trial began on 7 November 1455 at Notre Dame Cathedral, when Joan's mother publicly delivered a formal request for her daughter's rehabilitation. Joan's visions played an important role in her condemnation, and her admission that she had returned to heeding them led to her execution. Theologians of the era believe that visions could have a supernatural source. Her visions have been described as hallucinations arising from epilepsy or a temporal lobe tuberculoma. Joan's cross-dressing was the topic of 5 of the articles of accusation against her during the trial. In the view of the assessors, it was the emblem of her heresy. Her final condemnation began when she was found to have resumed wearing men's clothes, which was taken as a sign that she had relapsed into heresy. Joan of Arc is one of the most studied people of the Middle Ages. Her image, changing over time, has included being the saviour of France, an obedient daughter of the Roman Catholic Church, an early feminist, and a symbol of freedom and independence. After Joan's execution, her role in the All Anne's victory encouraged popular support for her rehabilitation. Joan became a central part of the annual celebration, and by 1435 a play portrayed her as the vehicle of the divine will. Joan's early legacy was closely associated with the divine right of the monarchy to rule France. Joan is a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. Her feast day is 30 May, the anniversary of her execution. She was viewed as a religious figure in All Anne's after the siege was lifted and an annual panegyric was pronounced there on her behalf until the 1800s. Joan is also remembered as a visionary in the Church of England.